Season's greetings, 7th fans, and welcome to another episode of The Digital Dump. Tonight, we're looking at Dungeons 3. Dungeons 3 is available on both PC and PS4. May even be available for Xbox One. I'm not entirely sure on that. I'm assuming it is. Now, right off the bat, I will admit to having a certain bias towards this game, not because it was made available to me by the publisher for the purposes of this review. No, I have a bias towards this game because it is a spiritual successor to the Dungeon Keeper series from many years back from Bullfrog Development, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was the name of the original team, was Bullfrog. I had a deep-seated, almost sexual passion for that series. I loved Dungeon Keeper. I was completely obsessed with it. Right around when it came out, I had just upgraded my rig, my PC rig, and that was one of the first games I picked up after upgrading my PC, and I just completely became obsessed with it. I played it constantly for over a month. I just hours and hours and hours I put into that game, and the same with the sequel, although many people didn't like the sequel as well as the original. Of course, in more recent times, this was another series that Electronic Arts ruined by turning it into a mobile game and filling it with microtransactions. They totally ruined the game. Dungeon Keeper is not what it once was. But thankfully, we have the Dungeons series, which has more than made up for it. In every way you could possibly imagine, the Dungeon series is Dungeon Keeper. And especially so with this new game, Dungeons 3, because they've actually got the original narrator from Dungeon Keeper in here, and bringing along his sardonic sense of humor to the mix. It really feels like it just picks right up where the original Dungeon Keeper series left off. Now, for those of you who never played Dungeon Keeper, it is a strategy game that's mixed with a sort of almost tower defense type of setup before tower defense was really a thing as far as genres go. You are a evil, malevolent force, and you have a dungeon that you build up using various different creatures that you can conjure from your dungeon heart. You send them out to build your dungeon, to collect gold, which you can use to fund, to expand it, to build torture rooms and various other defenses to protect against those evil, valiant knights who want to come and defeat you. In other words, it's a strategy game where you're the bad guy. If you remember the Overlord games from last generation, it's kind of like that, only instead of just leading minions around, you're actually building a base and waiting for the good guys to come to you. Although in the Dungeon series, you do occasionally go above ground and take the fight to them, which is a little bit different from what Dungeon Keeper originally did, but I'm all for it. Nothing wrong with a little change. Nothing wrong with a little expanding the gameplay. Now, what you start out with are these little minions, and they're the ones you see running around in here. They're the ones that dig your holes. They're the ones that build your new rooms. They're the ones that mine your gold. Not really worth much in the way of combat, to say the least. And if you've ever run into one that you feel isn't quite doing his job, all you have to do is give him a good smack, and that'll speed him up. Of course, the whole point of the game is to build your dungeon as formidable and as evil as possible. Get as much gold as possible so you can keep building your dungeon up and slay those good guys and move your way on up through their forces. That's the whole point of this game. And with each iteration of your dungeon, it gets more complicated. You unlock new types of rooms, new types of minions to control, and it just goes on and on and on, building slowly the complexity and getting you more and more addicted to the gameplay. The graphics for this type of game are very well done. It's very high quality, looks fantastic on either PC or PS4. Now, if you play it on PS4, obviously the controls aren't quite what you would get quality-wise from the PC version, which is what you're watching here, because you're not playing with a keyboard and mouse. It's still rather intuitive. It's a really nice setup the way they converted it over to the DualShock 4, but it's still not as smooth as just playing it with a mouse. Admittedly, mouse and keyboard are easier for this particular genre and especially for this particular game. Another aspect that really builds on what this series is, just as well as it did for the original Dungeon Keeper series, is the narration. This particular title, Dungeons 3, they bring back the same narrator from the previous title, Dungeons 2. He's also the gentleman that narrated the Stanley Parable, for those of you who enjoyed that game. So that ought to give you an idea of the quality we're talking about here. He has a real sardonic wit in this game, and there's a new character, a dark elf princess, that he interacts with quite a bit, and the humor there is a lot of fun. Overall, if you're looking for a real-time strategy game this generation, you'll be hard-pressed to find something more fun than Dungeons 3, especially if you were a fan of the original series. This game is so addictive. You have no idea. Once you start, I'm warning you, you're going to have a hard time putting this one down. It's built on the reputation of the original series and has, in my opinion, surpassed it. It's a fantastic, fun, and hilarious game. Dungeons 3 gets a 7 out of 7.